My name is Kate. I am a Houston Holocaust Museum volunteer, and I study the Holocaust, mainly Jewish teens and children. But the thing that really separates me from other volunteers and other people my age who study this is that I am autistic.
I need some love now, love now. I thought you were the home run hitter, holding my heart like it's holding my heart like it's
Enjoy, and yours, love, Tammy. Which I responded, my heart is breaking for you and your beautiful family. If you need anything, please let me know. Hava meant so much to me, and I will always be thinking of you. Please let me know if there's anything you need. So, in the museum, I volunteer every Tuesday. And Hava's picture with her brother Peter, is there all the time, so I always took pictures. This is one of my favorite photos of Hava. Here's a better version of that photo. This is when they were real young. Hava was 92. This is a beautiful photo of Hava. I love that picture of her. Oh yeah, I have that. I repeat a lot. Oh, so this is Hava and Peter. She looks like a little boy here, doesn't she? But no, that's her and Peter, and they were out on some lake or something having a good time, probably in the summer when they were babies. She had that photo, actually. She always kept that photo. And there's the museum. When Hava was alive, I would always take a picture of this for her. And I would say, look, there you are. There you are in the museum. But let's see, let's get to a good picture. This is her brother's thing. So as you can see, a lot of it, so when you click on that screen, this is what pops up. Now they'll have to redo this biography on them because Hava is no longer here. This is their family. This is her mother, her father, Peter, and there's Hava. Hava's real name, or should I say English name, was Eva Ginzova, and she was Czech, but she lived in Israel for the past 50 years. She raised her children there. Israel was her home, and she really was a sweet woman, I'll tell you. I miss her so much. It's really sad when you lose a Holocaust survivor, I'll tell you, because It's like part of our history is slowly dying. Part of that history is slowly dying. And there's nobody else left to talk about it, or, we'll talk about it. There's them, the Czech streets. And I love their outfits, It's really cool that people don't dress like this anymore, but my God, this woman. I have the same picture. Oh, my favorite picture. Oh, there's her when she was just a baby. It's the cutest little baby. She's so cute. So she was born in February. Actually, her and Peter were born in the same month. Peter was born February 1st, 1928. She was born the February 21st, 1930. And then she left, and there's little Hava right there in the baby carriage, and there's Peter, oh, so excited, having a new baby sister. And there's a photo of them together. I think that's the most known photo of them together. I once asked her, once upon a time, if talking about her brother, who didn't survive the Holocaust, if that was painful for her. And she told me in the most sweetest way, she said, it was very painful at first, but now he gives me strength to talk about him. And I think the world should know, because it was such a loss for me, not knowing him as an adult, and I think all mankind lost out. And I would agree. And there's Hava, Mom, Peter. Cute little, oh, look at his little lederhosen. Oh, he's so cute. So sweet. And yeah, it's funny to see the height difference between him. So Peter must have been very tall, and then Hava was kind of short. And then here's the picture. Peter is pretty tall, and there's their family. This is a very lovely family photo. I think this was taken right before the Nazis invaded the Czech Republic in 1939. But this is how I will always remember Hava, smiling, and there's Peter, and here's some family pictures. Here's Ava, or Hava, and there's Hava. It's funny, I'll call her Hava and then I'll call her Ava in between, but mostly she's Hava to me. This is my favorite photo of Hava of all time. I have this in every book that I ever have written about Hava. I put it in every article that I've ever written about the woman. It's my favorite photo, and I'll tell you why. Because it's one of the very few the few that I've seen of them together, and it's just a very cute photo. I love her little smile anyway. But it's one of my personal favorites. And it's one of the photos that I've been able to see and post and share. And personally, it's just a very amazing photo. I think I have like 3 copies of this, so that's not a good photo. There we go. There's Hava and Peter, and they're in the countryside. Oh, this is cute. I love little Hava's face. That's the vibe. That's the vibe of a 5-year-old. I feel like that is an absolute vibe. Like, that's my vibe, man. I get it. But I first met Hava in 2011. It was February. I think it was right after her birthday, and I was doing research on Peter. Or Peter, as I call him, Peter. Peter is she pronounced it Peter or Peter. And I asked her some questions, and then I asked her about herself, and then I asked if I could, check in just to make sure she's okay, and she said yes. So we talked for a couple more years, and then I think she told me she wasn't feeling all that well, so she wouldn't have time to respond, sadly. And then when I was writing my book, which was then Lives That Mattered, which turned into Among the Many, which you can buy, I wanted to include Hava as one of the survivors because she was still here at the time. And I got in touch with her beautiful family, her daughter especially, Tammy, and she's just been so sweet, I'll tell you, and so lovely to me. And she always gave me updates about Hava, and she's always been so gracious. They've all been so gracious about giving me updates on Hava and how she was doing, and you know, for Tammy, she basically said it's not looking good. And I always thought that if you prayed and if you wished and hoped to God that a miracle would happen, she'd get better, but it didn't seem that way. And then it was September 24th, 2022 at 10 p.m. at night, my time. She gave me the news of Hava had passed away. This was a commission that I had done for one of the books that I'm writing now. And the guy who did this was a guy named Shane McCormick, and he's a wonderful Irish artist who does amazing things with photos. And so I asked him to, so the overlay right now, the overlay that you see is Hava's handwriting from her diary in Terezin. So Hava was deported to the Terezin ghetto of May of 1944, and she was 14. And she wrote about her time that she suffered in Terezin, her hunger, her diseases, her worry for Petter and everything. And the last time she ever saw Petter alive. Here's the the full version of the because I think when I went back to the museum that first time after she passed, oh God, it was so hard to go into that exhibit knowing her picture was there and having to talk to students and saying, I'm sorry, but Hava had just passed away. It was so hard for me. Like, it was so, like, I broke down, like, twice because I just could not bear the fact that Hava was gone. I don't take death lightly. I'm autistic. I don't take death lightly. I never have and I never will. Her death was no different. I broke down and I sobbed so hard. I broke down. And so in the exhibit, here's Hava and here's Peter, the famous photo that everybody knows and loves. And so, and also she's on this touch screen as well. And when you press on it, you get to read her diary and things of that nature. Oh, here's the cover that of the book that I'm working on. And as you can see, that famous photo that I really, really love. This one. I think this will always be one of my favorite photos of Hava. I think her lasting legacy was, you know, it is always important to discuss the past and never forget it, and people who are, you know, who don't learn from it are doomed to repeat it, and all that what she taught me. But she was in a great documentary about Peter, or Petter as I call him. And she was there and she discussed a lot of Peter and what he was like and things like that. So it's really sad that we don't have her here now, but I'm glad, to me, that I can be at peace that she's not suffering as she was for a long time. And she was suffering for a very, very long time. Okay. Oh my God. This is one of the sweetest photos I have of her. And she's holding the picture that I love so dearly. But every time I go into the museum now, I always take a photo. all the time. I take a photo of her and I send it to Tamar and I say, this is what I remember now. This is what I have. So this is what you read when you click on her. I have a lot of pictures of her initially. There's her and her brother. People say they look a lot alike. And I would say they were. But I think the most thing that I will remember about her was her kindness. She was always so sweet and always so encouraging. She said to me, it's not every day I get a young person that wants to study the Holocaust. And I said, well, I'm different than most young people. I'm very, very different. And I will always be... This is one of the last known photos of Hava before she got really sick. And she looks really cute. And she's just this adorable little old lady. But she had been through so much. Especially during the Holocaust. And she had to rebuild her life without Petter. Which was an incredible loss for her. But she didn't let it bother her. You know, at least with me, it seems she didn't let it bother her. But I know it must have. I know it must have bothered her so much. So whenever I was designing the book cover, I made sure she was on the cover. This is one of the main photos that people like to use of Peter because it's a beautiful family photo. And there's Hava. Some people like to crop this out. This is where that photo that was colored came out. It cropped out. And there's the picture. Again, I think I have like 3 or 4 versions of this photo. I mean, it's the same photo, but it's just big, small, different colors. And that's all I will remember about her. You know, how much she was so sweet and she meant a lot to me. She still does. I mean, she's never gone. She will never be gone from me, I tell you. She is always here with me. But I think this holiday season, especially for Hanukkah, will hurt. I think every holiday will hurt, you know, without her. Yom HaShoah, you know, I always told her I was thinking of her. And she would always say, oh, you know, you're very sweet, you know, you're very kind, and you're always remembering everything. You know, what do you gain out of this? I said, well, I don't, because what I do is I want to remember people. I want to give you a voice. So now Hava is giving me the opportunity to never forget. Never forget. That's what she teaches me every day. And there's Hava with 2 of her friends, and she's wearing the star. Let's see what other photos I have of this woman. Yeah, there she is right there. There's her when she was real little. There's Petter. There's her dad. And there's me at the museum, and of course there's there. This is pandemic, I guess. So, and then the rest apparently are not her, but anyway. Oh, this is her. I think this says, this is the Christmas, 5th of December, I 1937. And this was her ice skating. Let me see if we can zoom in. There we go. Look at that little face. She never changed. She looked the same when she got older, but she was so cute. And her artwork, wow, her artwork is amazing. I mean, I've looked at some of it, and it's just incredible. I love it. I love it. I love it. She will always be one of my, I think with the survivors that I've known, Hava is definitely one of the top 5 that I've loved for years. She was one of the very first that I ever spoke to. It was Peter Feigl, it was Renee Kahn-Silver, and then it was Hava. It was Hava, you know. I think she was the 3rd one. So she meant so much to me. And she always will. it is amazing that I have these. I know you probably recognize some of these because Hava and Peter are together. But Peter is, or Peter as I call him, is a very important boy to discuss. He really is. He was a wonderful artist who did amazing art and who wrote wonderful stories and things of that nature. Oh, look at his little lederhosen. It's so cute. There's Hava looking all adorable. Peter was born on the 1st of February, 1928. And he was born in Prague, in the Czech Republic. And Prague is now one of the most beautiful, like one of the most famous cities in the Czech Republic. It's probably the capital, if I'm not mistaken. There's baby Peter! He's so cute. Look at his little clothes. He's so cute. So there's his dad, there's his mom, there's him. And look how tall he is, you know. So he began his diary in the spring, or I guess in the spring of 1941. Or no, he didn't, not in the spring, I'm sorry, in September of 1941. I lied. He had 2 diaries before he was deported to Terezin in 1942. And then he wrote a Terezin diary between the years of 1942 to 1944, or 1943 to 1944. And with Peter, his diaries never really express his feelings, really. He talks about what he did during the day, especially his older diaries. He talked about, you know, what was going on in the world at the time, and then he would write some of his short stories or poems in his diaries. These photos are very lovely, are very wonderful, because it shows what his family was like, how family came first. You know what I mean? Family was important to him, and Hava it was too, and it'll always be with Hava. Peter, this was a very interesting photo of him because he wasn't smiling. And I think for him, he probably was not in a good mood, or he probably knew that his deportation was coming, and he was probably really worried. But according to Hava, he never talked about it, he never discussed it. While he was in the Terezin ghetto, he contributed to, and basically wrote and published and illustrated an underground magazine called Vedem. And Vedem basically means we lead, or we are leading in Czech. And it was done by a couple boys in his barrack. And they would ask other boys to contribute some satire, some poetry, some stories, anything they could do. And he would bind all these magazines, and he would pass them around to the ghetto, but they were never caught. For if they were caught, they would have been murdered immediately on the spot. So this is again my favorite photo of Peter. And there's the most known one of Peter with the family. It's the one that people tend to use all the time. And Peter, unfortunately, was murdered at Auschwitz at age 16. He was just a teenager. But his diaries were saved by some miraculous miracle. And Hava published them. This is also one of my favorite photos of Peter. I don't know if he's holding a frog. I don't know if he's holding anything, but according to Hava, he was a very scientific boy. He loved the sciences, and he loved to draw, and he loved nature. And you can tell in this photo. Yeah, there's him, his cute little outfit. There's him and his dad. There's Peter and Hava and his mom out on a bridge near a lake or a river in the Czech Republic. Let's see, I know I've got other pictures of him. Let's see. So Petter is actually located twice in the Houston Holocaust Museum. He's located once in the diary exhibit, which I exclusively see him every Tuesday. So I always take a snapshot. And he is located by the library, which is really cool. So a lot of people don't know that Ilyan Raman, who was an astronaut, wanted to go to space, and he wanted to take something from the Holocaust with him. And Yad Vashem, which is the Holocaust Museum in Israel, gave him a copy of Petter's drawing Moon Earth, I think is what it was called. And let's see here. Let's see, yeah. This was also done by Shane McCormick, and it was a beautifully done photo. It was basically the photo that was of him and Hava, and he basically cut Hava out, and it's just Peter, and you can see Petter's handwriting. And there's Petter. It's not a very good photo quality, but it is him. And there's him when he was a lot younger. And there's him and Hava on the board here with Peter Feigl and Elizabeth Kaufman Koenig, Klaus Langer, Yitzhak Rudashevsky, and one of my personal faves, Otto Wolff. Peter Feigl, who's a very dear friend of mine, and I love him dearly. Oh, it's small. There's Petter as well. See, that's the most known photo that people use on social media. There's him. There's him. This is the picture that Hava used for the book. And I think she used it because it really embodies what he was about. And of course there's Hava there. And there he is, enjoying life. There's him and Hava, and they are always out in nature enjoying themselves. And here's the picture that was colorized, so they just cut Hava out of that photo. And here's Petter will show up in books sometimes. He will. So down here, this is his art. So you can see that he did what his art looked like, what his room looked like in Terezin. It says Petter was transported to Auschwitz in 1944, where he was gassed at the age of 16. The diary of Petter Gans was published in 2007. Actually, it was published in 2004, but give or take a couple of years. Peter was a talented writer, illustrator, and illustrator. Yes, he was. So, and there's him. When I went to the museum for the first time, I took a lot of pictures, and then let's see. Here's him looking kind of confused. I don't know how this photo was taken, but it was taken on the streets. And there's Peter and there's Hava. Let's see. This is a very good photo. I think this is the same photo that Hava used for his page of testimony at Yad Vashem. Page of testimony basically meant a death certificate. So she basically said, he died and all that. But I think Peter's death was really a tragedy, honestly, because he was one of the 1.5 million Jewish teens and children that were murdered. We could have gotten great things from him. I feel that if he would have survived, we would have gotten great things from him. I think he would have been a great illustrator. I think he would have been a great writer. I think he would have found the cure to diseases like cancer or COVID, believe me. I think he would have found the cures for that. And then here's his stone here. In the Czech Republic and in Europe, there are things called stuples or stoppels. I forgot what they're called, stools or something. Basically, they're stones of Holocaust victims, and and people put them down on who they are. And so Peter Gans, there's his right there. Let's see, a lot of it's Hava because Google thinks that Hava and Peter are the same person. Here's the photo that's one of the very first photos I ever saw of Petter, and I think it's a very good photo. It's not a very clear one, but it's the same photo that he was smiling in. It's from this photo shoot. And there's him when he was real little. And there's the photo that everybody knows and loves because, it's such a famous photo, Such a famous photo. I think the world lost out on him. I think the world really did. I think Hava had to grow up without her brother, which I think was really difficult for her, but she managed to, have her own family and love them as much as she loved him. But I think when she passed, and I think it was said at the museum to me that Peter reached out his hand and he held Hava's hand as they walked together home, which I think was very sweet because I think that he had been waiting on her for a long time. And I think that when she died, he knew that she was coming home, and he was very happy about it to see her, I'm sure. But that's because I'm very spiritual, and I believe that when someone dies, you are reunited with your loved ones. I think that's how I feel in my way. So I think Peter, or Petter, as I call him, was very sweet, and I think he said, what took you so long, But they're together now, and I'm glad that they are in some way, shape, or form. And Peter, I feel like, was this rich boy that had not like rich as in money, but like he had like rich imagination because he wrote this amazing story that was an allegory to Nazism, and it was called I think it was called a prehistory of something. Goodness, I can't remember now. But anyway, A Visit from Prehistory, that's what it was called. And it was about a machine named Kadu, who was basically the Nazis, who took over the world, and how the soldiers are trying to fight this machine and trying to destroy him. And the machine is eventually destroyed, and the world is saved. And I think he thought that, this will end soon. Well, in my closing remarks, there we go. There's a better version of the photo. So anyway, I feel like mankind or humanity really lost out on this boy. I really felt like he could have had a lot to offer us. Excuse me. But instead, we killed him. Why? Because he was Jewish. That's the only reason why we killed him. That's it. It had nothing to do with if he was a bad person or not. He was probably one of the sweetest boys. But he taught Hava so much in that time that they had together in Terezin. He taught her English. He taught her shorthand. He taught her, how do you prepare yourself for liberation. And he was very educational with her. Education was so important to him. So Peter's legacy will always be very special to me. And I will do my best to keep his voice going, as when I'm in that museum with him. Let's get a good... Let's see. Oh, you know what? I'm going to just... Here we go. When I'm in the museum with him and his sister, I know that Peter's voice is extremely loud for me. But that's because I can feel the vibrations of, I don't want to say I can like feel them or hear them, or they're in the room with me. That sounds really weird, and that's not what it is. But I always feel like they're there with me, and they're loud, saying, I'm here, we're alive, help us. So my job as a Holocaust historian and as a Holocaust museum volunteer is to keep his voice going and to educate the public on him and to let people know that he was once alive. So this book really means a lot to me. This was actually one of the first Holocaust diaries I ever bought with my own money. And you can tell it's been through so much because I've had this since high school, but luckily it has survived since high school. And Hava actually published this, I want to say, let me see if it says 2004. Yes, 2004 she published this. It was copyright. And the thing that I love about it is that not only does she publish his diary, she puts in some of his art, which is really beautiful. And this is the famous art piece that Ilan Ramon took to space. And this is what Peter's diary looked like. It's written in Czech. And this is a lot of his work here, his diary here. And I can't read it because first of all it's in Czech and it's really close together and I just cannot read it for the life of me. Anyway, and this is his art, and his art, just like Hava's, is fantastic. I mean, he drew flowers, which I thought was really pretty, watercolor and paper. And this is what he did in the Terezin ghetto when he was there. He just wrote ghetto there in English. And then he did these also in the Terezin ghetto as well. So not only was he creative in the Terezin ghetto, he was also very just working hard. And she also posts some family photos as well. And I'm very appreciative for Hava for this book because it shows what Peter was writing. And so this was Peter Gins's diary from the 24th of February of the year 1942, Tuesday until dash. So the diary ends with an entry on August 8th, 1942, a month before Peter's transport to Theresienstadt, which is Terezin. 24/11/1942, so I guess this is the 24th of February, 1942. In the morning, I was at home. In the afternoon, a car came from the health insurance to take Daddy to the Jewish hospital on Lublanska Street. The car was beautiful, modern, and very springy. It arrived at 3:30 p.m. The Miloses could have been poisoned by gas leak.
Us, just for 1 second.
Readjust myself?
Yeah.
Should I readjust myself too?
Oh no, you're perfect where you are.
Alright.
And action.
And then he says, in the afternoon, I think this is March 4th, 1942. In the afternoon at school, we had a test in music. I didn't know anything, but I was clever enough to copy it. Afterwards, I had an oral exam in natural history, and we took a math test. In the afternoon, I was outdoors with Slavic, which is funny because Slavic also is a name that Otto Wolff used to describe the guy too. Alright, in the afternoon, I was in town and at the dental ambulatory clinic on Kelly Street. You stare skloy. Oh, okay, translated. You stare skloy by the old school. This is the original Czech name of the street, changed to Kelly Street under the Nazi regime, of course, because of the abscesses that has been forming on my gums for a long time now. In the afternoon at home. So you see, he doesn't really describe any of his feelings. He describes what he did during the day. But as Hava said, she never saw any entry that he was worried or scared or frightened. You know, when he was writing this diary, his writing was very orderly, as she put it, and very nice and neat. But coming to his own deportation, he began to write very nervously, and he was just unorganized with his writing. So let's see if we can see any of that unorganization. Okay, so at the end she says, towards the end of his diary, Peter's handwriting becomes more nervous. His handwriting is different, disorganized, unsteady. It is clear that he's going through a major psychological crisis. He feels that now it is his own turn. His childhood has ended, his happy life with his parents, his sister, his school is finished. 14-year-old Petter begins 2 years of living in Theresienstadt with new friends and new creative projects. 2 years which ends his journey to a gas chamber in Poland. So this is very important to know that his voice will always be loud to me. It always will be screaming, you know, oh, I'm here, help me. And it's my goal and my job as, like I said, as a Holocaust historian, as a Holocaust historian who studies teens and children, you know, Petter means the world to me, and he always will.
I never saw anything he wrote that he is frightened or worried, or because everything in his diary he wrote, it was just recording facts, not feelings. He didn't feel a need to record his feelings, because his feelings he remembered, and the facts he was afraid to forget.
Kanye's being dumb again, praising Hitler. Oh God. Oh, Nazis are rising everywhere. Isn't that fun? Gosh. But then again, this country doesn't have an issue with anti-Semitism. Oh no, it doesn't, right? I think what really bothers me, and it's really sad, is that so many of these people, like I would say like politicians too, and these celebrities, they take, you know, what he says into consideration. They'll blame us in some certain degree of whatever they want to blame us for. Or, oh, we control the media, and all these very anti-Semitic lies that have been taken as facts because they've been told over and over. This is nothing new, folks. It's ridiculous. But for me, this makes my job as a Holocaust Museum volunteer a lot more important. Because, hold on one second, because for me...
An unknown phone number said...
okay, there we go. Sorry about that. Anyway, my job as a Holocaust Museum volunteer is to educate the public. That's what I do. I educate them. So for me, that's the young people. The diaries that I study, the people that I study, they were real. They had feelings. They know what this looks like because they died for it. Unfortunately for them, they did not get the chance to live, a lot of them past their 18th or 20th birthday. There are a few exceptions to some diarists, like my friend Peter Feigl, who was able to survive. But it's really, really tragic that people cannot understand that what they say could hurt the other people. it's really sad that Kanye has to spew all this rhetoric that white supremacists just love. It's tragic. People don't understand that that's how the Holocaust started, is with all this rhetoric that Jews controlled everything, Jews controlled the banks, we do everything. But here's the thing about that. We did those things because we were not allowed to get into society, to be in mainstream society. We just weren't. And then we are successful, we're your doctors, we're bankers, we're lawyers, we're a lot of things, because that's what we did to survive. It's very upsetting that people now, but unlike then, we do have a lot of people that are outraged and they condemn and they say never again. But you have to understand what this does to a Holocaust survivor when they hear all this rhetoric being done. It's terrifying to them. I remember talking to Irene Fogel-Weiss, who is a Holocaust survivor from Auschwitz, and she is terrified, absolutely terrified about what is happening right now in our country. She's trying to make plans to leave and she doesn't know where to go because she doesn't know where she'd be accepted or wanted. We can't have these survivors live in fear of a country that won't condemn this. Study, mostly, are of teens and children. And you're thinking, yes, Kate, that is a very niche part of the Holocaust to study. But for me, that's what speaks to me more than anything, are the voices of the young people. Because who gets affected most by all this are the young people. It's... How do I say this in a way that's not over-exaggerant? But it's like, if you don't learn from history, things can repeat itself. Well, what is happening now is that there's a lot of anti-Semitic rhetoric that's coming again. Now, the Holocaust did not at all solve the problem of anti-Semitism. It did not. What it did do, though, was give these white supremacists and these conspiracy theorists, if you will, it gave them something else to mock us for. There'll be people that say, oh, the Holocaust never happened, or there were no gas chambers at Auschwitz, and all these, and we ourselves killed our own people. That's a funny one I've heard. But it's not, the Holocaust is something that we need to learn and study. Because if we're going to try to keep it happening from happening again, if we want to keep it, let me put it this way, if we want to stop it before it gets really bad, then we need to do something. That's why a lot of young people are, speaking out against this, condemning Kanye. But people need to stop interviewing Kanye. Like, I'm serious. People need to stop interviewing him. Because the more they do, the more rhetoric he spews out. Jews only make up, not even a lot of the world's population at all. They're not a lot. I think it's maybe 2.5%. But yet, it's like we are the marginalized group that usually gets attacked first. Because we're an easy target. That's how we've always been, sadly. With the Holocaust, though, it's like a new medium of attack. People will mock the way we were treated when Hitler was in power. But then, of course, people are like, oh, well, we need to forgive Hitler. No. Do you think Felicia's Garda would ever forgive the Germans or Hitler, for that matter? Do you think, Ruth Mayer's family would ever forgive him? No. It's not something we would gladly do. I want you to try to picture your family, your almost entire family, being murdered just because they were Jewish. It is very difficult for people to fathom. It's very difficult for people to comprehend. And it's very difficult for people to understand. It is very, very hard. Because people don't understand that, yes, we were targeted, we were rounded up, and then we were sent to death. That was the whole purpose of the Holocaust, was to exterminate the Jews. 6 million of us are gone. That's a lot of people. 6 million families were affected. And, you know, these people are just, you know, these goons, you know, act like it's not a big deal. They'll ban Anne Frank from classrooms. They'll ban any type of Jewish book or Holocaust book for no reason at all. I don't know why. Why are they afraid of her? Stop being afraid of a 15-year-old girl. Oh my God, stop being afraid of her. She is not scary. What she is trying to do is educate you people on what was really going on, because some of us had really no clue. America and the involvement of the Holocaust. There is a great documentary called The U.S. and the Holocaust made by Ken Burns that just came out, and it's fabulous. Please watch it if you have the chance, wherever you can stream it or find it. It is so good because it explains how America, people would like to say, oh, America was a safe haven for Jews. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. They let some Jews in. They let us in somewhat, but then they had a cap on their immigration policies. So we pretty much were murdered. No other country would help us besides Asia, which the Philippines did not require a visa. So a lot of Jews were able to get to the Philippines. Some Jews were able to get to Canada. Some Jews were able to get to Australia. Some Jews were able to get to what is now Israel, which at the time was, I guess, Palestine, at that time. But it's just so, to me, this whole world, this is not the world I thought I'd grow up in. You know, I know people are going to be racist and prejudiced no matter what, but for all of this now, and also to think that some of these people, I'll say these goons, think that Anne Frank had white privilege. If she had white privilege, she would still be alive. She did not have white privilege because in the eyes of the Nazis, Jews were not considered pure. They were not. Even though Peter Gins, completely white, blonde hair, blue eyes, was not pure because he was not fully Aryan, according to the Nazis. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Keep Anne's name out your mouth, please, because spoiler alert, she doesn't like you. She knows what's going on. Long story short, she knows. It's not like she's just dead and she's forgotten. She knows what's happening. I can imagine that so many of these survivors' families that are still alive, like second gen, third gen, they are terrified and horrified by what is happening. Rabbis are trying to figure out what to do. They're trying to figure out how, for their safety, like how to protect their temples from crazy people trying to shoot up temples, which have happened in the past several years because of these anti-Semitic rhetoric and lies. Just this year, we had that happen. We had a hostage situation at a temple because some goon thought that we knew people in government. We do not. But that's one of the lies that people tell, that we know we're trying to take over the world, we're in power, we know everything. Good Lord, no, we do not. I can assure you. All we want, or at least the Jewish people want, is to be left alone. That's all we want. To be remembered and to educate the public about the Holocaust, and especially for me, about these young people. That's why now I've decided to bring my Holocaust diary collection. That's what I want to do, is bring these books so students, when they come into the museum and into the exhibit that I work in, because the Holocaust diary exhibit is my territory. That's my thing. That's my exhibit. And people at the museum know that. So they put me there exclusively because they know that that's what I study mainly. That is my focus, are the voices of teens and children. when it comes to their diaries. Why? Because you must realize that Anne Frank's book was put in my hands when I was 9 years old. My grandfather gave me that gift. The one story I'd like to tell you is the story of my grandfather. No, sadly, he was not a Holocaust survivor, but the way that he talked about the war then, you might, the way that I talk about him, you would think he was one. But he was not one at all. He was not. My grandfather was born here. He was born in Borger. And Borger is kind of a very small town up by the Amarillo area. He lived in Fort Worth for almost half his life. And when the war hit America, or should I say when the war came to America, he wanted to go and enlist. He wanted to go and fight and said he wanted to just kick some Nazi ass. That's what he wanted to do. But he was 13, but his brothers served. And his mother said, I'm losing 2 boys, I'm not losing another one. My grandfather was really a man that studied history as he got older and wanted to know more about what he had just grown up in. Because he grew up in the 30s and 40s. He grew up when the Holocaust was occurring. But he knew that later, he always told me that Anne Frank was going to open doors for me. And he told me that Anne Frank is going to be the reason why I'm going to fight for so many people. What he didn't realize, my grandfather has now since passed, sadly, but what he did not realize is that Anne Frank not only opened those doors for me, but she gave me other diaries to study and other people to fight for, which now, has led me to this wonderful volunteer opportunity that I do every Tuesday. It's amazing when you get to be in that exhibit and you see those faces and those diaries or on display, or the voices that are on display. It gives you a feeling that you have something more to fight for. For me, that's what I intend to do. And God is my witness, I'm going to keep fighting for them until I can't fight for them anymore. But I think with so many diaries that are now coming out, or diaries that are being discovered, and so many different diaries that are just, oh my God, honestly, they're just so special. Every diary that is published, I buy. My last one that I bought was, I want to say it was Yitzhak Yudashevsky's diary, and I found that for a very good price, because diaries like Yitzhak's and Moshe's are out of print now. Anne Frank will never be out of print. You won't have to worry about that. She has a foundation behind her that publishes it every year, which is great. Or every few years, I should say. But anywho, I'm glad that she keeps getting her book published. It's great. But I do wish the same for other people's diaries, because they don't get the same treatment. Moshe's diary has been out of print for over 20 years. But very rarely will you find it on like eBay, or you can find it on Amazon. Amazon, you pay like maybe $100 for it. For me, I got mine as a gift, so I don't know how much someone paid for my copy. But I can tell you, when I was trying to look for it, it was not cheap. Yitzhak's diary is a little bit more out of print as well, but the reason it has not been in print for so long is because there hasn't been a foundation, or I guess a museum, to republish it every year. Mary Berg's diary is going through this right now. Mary Berg's diary, luckily, is going to be republished, and I'm going to be a part of that process, so I'm very excited. Otto Wolff's diary, I'm trying to publish that in English, fully. And part of it was published in Salvage Pages, which is an amazing book, but I want to publish it fully so that people can finally read his diary. Rennie Spiegel's diary was just published not too long ago, thank God. It's been out of the bank vault for a few years. And I'm trying to think. Rutge's diary was just published too. I don't know if that diary will be out of print or so. I'm not entirely sure. Helene Bear's diary, you can find it. It's not hard to find. I think it was published also. a few years ago. Ruth Mayer's diary was published in 2009. You can still find it, but it has to be overseas though, because it was published in England. It was not published here in the States. It's just amazing, just the world that we live in now. I can't fathom what's going on now. It's terrifying. It's not the world I wanted to live in, and I'm sure it's not the world that these survivors want to live in either. I can tell you that now. It's not the world that they had hoped. They had hoped that when the Holocaust was over, it was done. But it's getting to the point where people are believing this rhetoric again. I mean, they always have, but it's like they need to know that it's not right. It's not the truth. These rhetorics have been they've been in the works for years, unfortunately. Anti-Semitism has been around for centuries. It's not like it's ever going away. If it is going away, we'd have the right to fight it, but people won't speak out against it. Why? Because, oh, it'll ruin my career. Oh, man. It'll make me look like a bad person. No, if you speak out against hatred, you're doing the greater good for your own self and for the other communities. Oh my God, people. Is interesting. It wasn't until a few days ago when I was volunteering at the museum, as I usually do, when a student came up and asked if there were any diarists part of the LGBTQ community. To my surprise, there is. I have found one. Ruth was born in November of 1920 in Austria, but it wasn't until my honeymoon in Portland this year when she kind of crash-coursed herself into my life. I was at Pal's bookstore just browsing the books as I usually do, and my husband said, "Do you have this?" And now, I had never heard of Ruth Mayer, let alone ever knew that she had a diary. Even though Ruth's story ends in tragedy, it was the research that was really an interesting journey. So Ruth she goes to Norway to finish her studies, basically. And she meets this poet named Gunvor. I'm sorry I'm butchering her name, God bless. Anyway, she meets her, and Gunvor really falls in love with Ruth, and Ruth falls in love with her, and they live together. And they both work, I guess, for the labor union or something. I'm not entirely sure. It's kind of a little weird, I guess, where they live together and all that. But anyway, Ruth is arrested because she's Jewish, not because she's queer or gay or any of that stuff. But she is arrested, and she is deported to Auschwitz, where she is murdered. Gunvor is in such disarray after all this. She dies, I believe, in a hospital. I think it's a mental hospital where she dies. I'll have to bring up the article again. But anyway, she has a lot of mental health issues after Ruth's death. She thinks Ruth is coming back. That's what she thinks. And after she finds out Ruth was murdered, it was all over for her. She never got over Ruth, I don't think. And that's, people like to tell me that, oh, the LGBTQ, it's all new and it's a fad and it's, everybody wants to be gay. No, these people have been around for years. Like, absolute years, guys. Like, Ruth, in her diary, she expresses her love for Gunvor, and she expresses her love for women in general. But then when you read more in her diary, she expresses her love for men as well. So you're like, okay, she could be bi, or she could just identify as queer. But either way, she definitely is part of the LGBTQ community. And it's a good resource for young students or the LGBTQ youth who want someone to look up to. I think Ruth is a perfect example of, she's a perfect example of someone you want to read about if you're trying to feel like you belong in this community. I don't think Ruth ever, quote, came out. I don't think that was a thing. I mean, it was a thing, but I don't think it was a thing for her, because she never expressed I came out. She never said, oh, I come out as this or I came out as that. She never did that. Ever. All she expressed in her diary was how much she loved a certain woman, Gunvor, or some other guy. But she was very interested in, I think, in everything, and she wanted to explore everything, and that's great. Like, good for you. Like, that's awesome. Gunvor, she's the reason why Ruth's diaries are here now. She saved them all. She kept them in her personal belongings, and when Jan Erik Vold was going to prepare a biography on Gunvor, he found the diaries, all of them, in a box. And he is the reason why they are out in the open now. Ruth's sister Judith did survive the Holocaust. She was able to get to England with her mother. But sadly, I don't even know if her sister's alive anymore. God, she was real old. But anyway, Gunvor is a very interesting character as well. She is the type of person I felt like that really had a lot of feeling. And with Ruth, it was like she felt like Ruth was the love of her life. But Ruth was murdered, sadly. Ruth was killed. And it wasn't because she was part of the LGBTQ community. I don't even think they knew, personally, but Gunvor, I think she had another partner, as far as I know, but it just wasn't the same. Ruth was gone, and she could not get over Ruth, and that was very painful for her, that she could not cope with the death of her lover. So, but more information about that when we arrive. And I can't wait to show you some of the articles that I've found that express what we've just discussed. This article, it says, Ruth Mayer's queerness is overlooked in Holocaust research. This is exactly what I was talking about. Like, oh my God, I'm researching this woman, you're reading her diary, and all of a sudden, it's like she's talking about loving a woman, she's talking about loving Gunvor, and then she's talking about loving a man. So, she's queer. She's here, she's queer. Awesome. So, it says here, so this is Gunvor here, and this is Ruth. And it says, the love between Gunvor Hofmo and Ruth Mayer is no secret in the research community and the general public, but the sexual descriptions in Mayer's diary have often been overlooked and downplayed. Okay, so I think there are a number of central questions in her text about being a woman and queer that have not been explored enough in the past, which is why which I'm keen to highlight. Says this. She's a doctoral candidate. So Ingeborg Helleberg is a doctoral candidate in the Department of Linguistics and Nordic Studies at University of Oslo, and she basically is writing this article. And so she wrote her diary from the age of 12 all the way up to 22. She was born in Austria, which I knew, but she is a refugee, and she went to Norway. And she lived in Norway from 1939 until the 26th of November 1942, when she was deported to Auschwitz on the cargo ship Danu and then killed upon arrival. Which, in her diary, it just said that she was arrested, basically, and she was taken and deported, but it doesn't say that she was on a cargo ship, which I can imagine because she's in Norway and they have to get all the way to Poland. So it says, in her diaries, Ruth Mayer wrote everything from banal everyday things such as schoolwork and leisure activities to philosophical aspects of her own sexuality and life as a Jew during German occupation. Yes. She says that today Ruth Mayer has a central place in the Norwegian memory culture and is sometimes referred to as our Anne Frank, which I understand, but the thing about when you're trying to compare Anne Frank to other diarists, they at least need to have something in common with her, not just the diary aspect. Anne was not queer at all, I can tell you that now. But until recently, almost no one in Norway had heard of her. Well, that doesn't surprise me, because when I looked at Ruth's diary, I had never heard of Ruth Mayer at all, period. Like, she just kind of popped out of oblivion and was like, here, I'm queer. Awesome. So, expands the Holocaust debate, the story, okay, but also a queer tale. Alrighty, so as Helleberg points out, it was not only the Jews who were victimized in Nazi, but they were minority groups, yes, I know, as homosexuals, yes. I think a topic we can talk more on. Ruth Mayer has been an important voice in this narrative. She's one of the few has written about being a woman and queer during the Second World War, which is very true, because like I said, when I study diaries and I read about the people, it is very rare for these diarists to put in how they feel about, say, well, let's take Ilya Gerber for an example. Ilya Gerber wrote, he was in the Kovno ghetto in Lithuania, and he writes that he loves this girl. I think her name is Hannah, I don't remember. But anyway, he loves her so much, and he talks about her a lot. Anne Frank and Renée Spiegel talk about their loves and their crushes. And they're both males, so you can tell that they are heterosexual. But when it comes to Ruth, when you're reading her diary, the first thing she states when it comes to school and their classmates, she's in love with a woman. And you're thinking, okay, she's a lesbian. Awesome. Good for you, girl. But then, as it turns out, she loves a man too. So she states that later in her diary. And it makes you go, okay, is she bi? Is she just queer? What is she? So you're reading this diary and you're just trying to figure out what she is. But when she comes to Gunvor, she really discusses how she feels wonderful with Gunvor and how she loves Gunvor. So in this article, it says the twin souls of Ruth Mayer and Gunvor Hofmo. I know I'm butchering her name. So in the fall of 1940, Ruth Mayer, oh, how nice. Okay, that's great. Bloop. Okay, in the fall of 1940, Ruth Mayer met Gunvor, later to become a well-known Norwegian poet, where both women volunteered with the Women's Labor Service in occupied Norway. Despite the difficult external circumstances, there was a shortage of food in Norway because of the war, and the farm work that the woman had to do was very strenuous. Mayer and Hofmo enjoyed a comparatively carefree and happy time together, which is great. The one twin died. Okay, but even during this period, Mayer found herself overcome by a sense of loneliness and being misunderstood, feelings which became particularly strong once the German Wehrmacht occupied Norway. They eventually led to a nervous breakdown, and in early 1941, Mayer had found herself committed to a psychiatric ward. Gunvor's visits were the only ray of hope during the 7 weeks she spent there. Okay, in fact, it seems that Hofmo was the only person in Norway who really cared about Meyer. Hofmo later referred to Meyer as her twin soul, and the one twin died. Norwegian police officers entered the Engelmann boarding house for girls and the young women in Oslo on November 26, 1942, and took Ruth Meyer away. The arrest is said to have been violent. Meyer was dragged into a car, forced to board the Danu, a prisoner transport ship, on the very same day. 5 days later, she was murdered at Auschwitz, along with 187 Jewish women, 42 children, and 116 men from Norway who were unable to work. Let's see if we can bring up a good picture of her. There we go. Gunvor, at this point, when Ruth is taken away, it's like she lost a piece of her. She lost a whole piece of her. So as this says here, Gunvor never got over the loss of her girlfriend. This traumatic experience was probably one of the reasons for the crisis Hofmo went through in the 1950s, which caused her to become a long-term patient at the Gostad Mental Hospital in Oslo for 2 decades. In the intimate post-war period, Hofmo had suffered from obsessions which became increasingly intrusive. She heard voices and was afraid of radiation in her head. On a vacation through France, she thought she saw Ruth Meyer again on a number of occasions, but the women she approached denied that she was Ruth. Oh man. Central parts of the lyrical work that Gunvor produced from 1946 onward with her love of her friend who had been cruelly snatched away from her. Hofmo had been referred to as the singer of darkness because of her poems. Okay. So, let's see here. This is Gunvor here. This is Gunvor and Ruth. This is Gunvor as well. Oops. Let's see. Oh, well, that's my Twitter. Haha, that's funny. My thing came up on my Twitter. That's so funny. Let's see if I can, there we go. I love this picture of Gunvor, but Gunvor, I think, is one of those people that really loved Ruth. And when you understand their relationship, it's like, wow, they really loved each other. And people like to tell me, oh, the LGBTQ, you know, they weren't existing then. No. What do you call their relationship? Well, anyway, their relationship is beautiful, and Gunvor just never got over her, really. It's sad. Like, it's depressing. It is depressing. Anxiety about queer topics. So it says, also in this article that I found, Ruth Meyer's love affair with Gunvor is no secret to in the research community and the general public. Nevertheless, Helberg believes that the sexual descriptions in the diary have been overlooked or downplayed. Okay. For example, people have preferred to call them girlfriends and soulmates rather than boyfriends. She refers to a quote taken from retelling of the diary from 2020. Finally, I was brave enough to show her my love. Just the two of us were on the bed, legs outstretched. Okay. I scratched at her suspenders with my fingernails bare very lightly. Instead of this dwelling on the intimate description of Meyer's love affairs, they have mostly been concerned with her status as a Jewish refugee. Of course. So they basically, what this article is saying, that they don't want to bring up the fact that she was queer or gay. They just want to say, oh, she was Jewish and that was it. Nobody will ever talk about it, it seems, because they're afraid that it'll, stir something up. A queer pioneer. I do think it is very interesting that when students come up to me, especially when I'm teaching at the Holocaust Museum or educating them in the diary exhibit, because that's my territory. That's where I am every Tuesday. And I have Ruth's diary right there on display. Some kids will ask me, are there any diarists that were part of the LGBTQ community? And I give them Ruth, because that's the only one that I know of so far. Only one. So it says in her diary, she writes openly about her crushes on both men and women. Now, this is what she does, because when I was reading it, I was lost, because I was like, I thought you said you just loved women. But this is where I lead to believe that she was bi, because she loved men and women. She talks about it in her diary. It's plain as day, right there, guys. Like, really plain. If you ever read it, please do. Find it. It's available. Please find it. It's good. I'm not done yet. On the other hand, the contemporary view of homosexuality defines Ruth Mayer's room for action and how she views her own identity. At the same time, she challenges and opposes such norm, explains Helleberg. With extraordinary freshman, Ruth Mayer explores various forms of masculinity, femininity, and sexuality. Her willingness to express herself about forbidden topics and her ability to relate to other people in that way is transcendent and fringes the time. In time, mean that Hellenberg considers a pioneer. I would agree. I would agree. She discusses topics very openly and problematizes the concepts. For example, that the feelings she has towards Gumvo are not unnatural but good, which would goes against the heteronormative ideals of the time. In a world, there is a beautiful love story that enriches her life. In several places in her diary, Ruth Mayer uses the term homosexual for people who fall in love with the people of the same sex, but she does not use this word about herself. Interesting. In several places of the diary, same-sex marriage, homosexuality has a stigmatism and limiting meaning that Mayer does not recognize. She loves both women and men and experiences her love as natural and enriching. So you could say that Ruth Mayer is queer or bi. She could very well be part of that community. And so it says the fact that Ruth Mayer fell in love with both men and women means that Helleberg had chosen to do a queer reading of the text. The term queer encompasses more than a category such as lesbian and homosexuals, she explains. Okay. Mayer does not write much about love relationships directly, but more about a number of courtships. Okay, she believes that people in research community are simply used how to interpret the relationship between Mayer and Hoffmo in the text. Okay, so let's see if this picture is big. There it is. This is one of the very few photos that you'll see. I think this is in the diary itself as well. This is Gunvor and this is Ruth. And I think for them, it's just this amazing love story that if you really dive deep into it, it's tragic, really, because Ruth is gone and Gunvor is trying to cope, but she doesn't know how to cope. It's sad, but it's amazing the fact that we have someone such as Ruth who is part of an LGBTQ community, that we hope to God that we could get Ruth's book into classrooms or in these youth's hands so that they can read it and go, oh, there was somebody like me during the Holocaust. Because, most people, when they think of the Holocaust, they just think of Jews and that's it. Well, there were a lot of other groups that were affected by this, such as the LGBTQ community, the Jehovah's Witness, and the Romas, and all the other non-Aryan people, if you will. But Ruth, she kind of is a double-edged sword. She's a Jewish refugee, and she's queer. I don't think when they arrested her, I don't think they knew that she was queer. If they did, I'm sure she would have had I think she would have been killed earlier. But luckily for Gunvor, she keeps those diaries, and we now have them because of Gunvor. And it's great that she kept them, but I think the reason why she kept them is because that was the only thing left she had of Ruth. And if she held on to them, then she could still hold on to Ruth too.
you.